thank you for joining us here at Connecting with Jennifer Filzen. Today I have Will Dukes of Sales Farmer. Now, Will and I met through Pablo Gonzalez, who is just the amazing connector with Be the Stage. And he's a LinkedIn celebrity and has put all these things together. And so he brought Will and I together. And I was so intrigued by what Will does that I thought it would be fun to introduce him to you guys. So welcome, Will. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. To put it short, I help people to stop wasting their marketing and prevent wasted marketing budgets. And we do that by making sure that the strategy that they have in place is actually generating the quantity and quality of leads that they need, and then that they have the right intake and conversion processes to actually be able to turn those leads into paying clients and customers. So if either one of those two things is kind of out of whack, then there's a very high probability that all the money and resources and time and effort that they're putting into marketing and promoting and growing their business is not going to be very functional.
You know what? I'm so glad you brought that up. I own Rockstar Marketing, and we are a marketing agency that caters to the services industries. And I tell you, there's a lot of flinging of stuff against the wall to see what sticks, right? And there are some things that are super easy to measure and some things that aren't. There's the tangibles and there's the intangibles. And with brand awareness, well, there's a lot of intangibles. So I'm so fascinated. You know, marketing is such a huge part of our world. Even if you're not in business for yourself, you're still marketing yourself. How we are as human beings, we're still marketing who we are by what we wear, what we drive, where we live, all that fun stuff. And marketing is essential for any business. Even if you're not the owner, you're still a marketing arm of that business, because you're the one that smiles when they pick up the phone. You're the one that takes the orders. You're the one that gives that customer service experience. So I'm fascinated in the world of marketing. What makes you special and unique?
So two things that I'll point out. So one from kind of the company and our business, and then one maybe a little bit more personal to me. From the company standpoint, our company is actually called SalesPartners. I've had it for about 11 years. People call me the sales farmer because one, I grew up on a farm in the north part of Florida. I taught agriculture and biotechnology in the secondary level for a little over 6 years. Was actually a district teacher of the year for one of the large teachers, one of the area region teachers. But both of those things kind of tie in to how we approach business, because one of my other mentors years back, she was like, you really just need to tie in everything you're doing into what you really know, like be authentic and bring that all together. And so when I really started to look at the sales and marketing processes and what I was helping folks with, which was largely sales in the front end, and I noticed that, you know, there is something to having the quality of leads. We've probably, a lot of folks have seen, you know, that classic Glengarry, Glenn Ross, and, you know,
always be closing.
Yeah, is always be closing, but, you know, put that coffee down, and coffee is for closers. And then later the older guy, I can't remember his name right now, Lemon or Levine, but nonetheless, he you know, he looks up, he's like, the leads are weak, and Alec Baldwin's, you know, pounding like, you're weak. But realistically, like, sometimes the leads can be very weak. And, you know, I'm sure you've seen it a lot, and I've seen a lot with, like, I just brought a contractor on the other day, and he's like, yeah, we threw like $6,000 at ads and it didn't turn into anything. Or we were putting them on, they said, do these Facebook lead forms, and we'd call people back and they're like, what, who are you? Why? I didn't fill out any daggum form. And like, and so there can be all those kinds of problems. And so when I started to migrate over into the marketing strategy portion, not getting so much into web design, or don't ask me to do the SEO, or, you know, set up and manage your Facebook ads, or any of those kinds of things. I leave that to the tactical experts. But it still came back down to this analogy that, you know, really trying to grow a business, growing a line of business in a larger company, it was a lot like growing stuff that we used to grow on the farm. So we grew a lot of like watermelons, tomatoes, peppers, sweet corn, and all of these things would be in different places of the farm, and they all had different cultivation processes, right? You didn't plant sweet corn like you did watermelons, but there was still a similarity there. And it always started with knowing what you were going to grow, where you were going to grow it. So we laid out a plan. And then it was preparing the soil appropriately for that crop. And then it was planting the seed. And then it was cultivating it for a time. And then eventually coming in, knowing when to harvest, harvesting that crop. And then there's an element in a lot of farming of propagating that crop into the next one. And so I sat down and really started thinking about it. And isn't that really a lot of what we're trying to do in a business, or at least think about it is, all right, we have maybe multiple services, but maybe they serve different target markets. And so what are we going to sell and who are we going to sell it to? All right, then how do we prepare the soil? How do we build trust and credibility with that target market? Not that that's going to create any sales at the end, but it amplifies things. It makes it a more fertile environment to then plant that seed, which is usually that initial offer of value, which maybe that's a free estimate, or maybe that's, I work with a lot of attorneys too, so maybe they have that initial consultation, or maybe it's that download of an ebook or a course or some other lead magnet that somebody has, but there's something there of value to begin that conversation, and for somebody to put their hand up and say, yeah, I'm interested in having this conversation and getting more information from you. And then comes that cultivation process. So we talk about lead nurturing is a common common thing out in the marketing space, and that's drawn directly from growing things. And so are you continuing to drip on them and to provide that value, but also protect those leads and opportunities through differentiation from your competition? And then do you know how to ultimately close that sale and be able to convert them into dollars? And then can you turn that sale and now propagate it into upsells, repeat sales from the same customers, or referrals and testimonials, reviews that can help you shorten that sales cycle and bring in other opportunities. So the thing that separates us from, I guess, both marketing companies that are providing that marketing as a service and maybe like sales training companies is that we're looking at that entire campaign as one strategic process, and we don't differentiate the branding and the marketing and the sales as different components in the business, completely different things. We look at them more as distinct components of the one thing, kind of like the drivetrain in a car. You have the engine, the transmission, and then the suspension and the tires, right? So they're all distinct, but if they're not all working together, they're not all properly connected, the car's not going anywhere. And we see the same thing in business. So that's kind of how our company approaches different things. And then me personally, from that education background, like when we take those identity tests and like, what are your strong suits and everything, like my core identity still comes back down to an educator. And so a lot of our work, there's some done with you portions of it, but a lot of it is more done with you. And my goal ultimately is to empower that small business owner so they know what the heck is going on. As we're laying out this campaign, I don't want the marketing to be this black box where now talking to their marketing person is more confusing than talking to their lawyer, right? And that happens a lot. And then making sure that they are walking away with those skills, that they're able to close those sales and be able to impart those skills onto the rest of their team as well. And then that ultimately, they may not ever be doing the back end SEO meta tagging of their website, but as long as they understand what is happening and know that those things should be done, then they can make better decisions about what marketing is going to be valuable for them and what's not.
Wow. Oh my gosh, so much good stuff. You said that you started off farming in northern Florida. I grew up in Jacksonville. Where were you?
So Union County, about an hour southwest. So go east to McClenny and then go about 30 minutes south of McClenny, and you'll be in the smallest little county in the state of Florida, only 4 traffic lights, no 4-lane roads, and 4 maximum security prisons.
Wow, that's really cool. My grandpa had a farm in Bunnell, which is Flagler
Oh
County.
yeah.
So Yeah, that's so cool. And I love, love, love the analogy of growing your crops and planting the seeds and harvesting. Beautiful analogy. I can totally tell that you're an award-winning educator, because the educators are often the best salespeople because they get that concept across so clearly. And good for you. Kudos to you. That is exceptional. Um, but you mentioned though that you don't do the work yourself. You allow the tacticians to do that. So are you functioning more as a coach, or what is your role?
So a lot of times there is a lot of coaching in that. And so a lot of times for my clients, we'll start off on kind of initial engagement, and we're strategically planning out that campaign. And a lot of times they have folks that they already trust, or this person, maybe it's in-house, or maybe it's an agency, or they may have a couple of people. A lot of times with small business, they end up getting somebody that does their website, and then somebody is over here as their printer, and somebody is their digital social media manager or something like that. And so we do our best to work with the resources that they already have. But a lot of times the frustration that the business owner has is not so much in the competency of the people they have working for them, but it's just kind of scattered. Like you mentioned before, it's all over the place. They just been throwing spaghetti against the wall. And a lot of times in any kind of business, when we're good at what we do, we get very focused on that. And it's true for a lot of good marketers. They come in and like, oh, we really focus on SEO, and we want to help people with that. And so now all of a sudden the owner of the small business, who was already kind of the executive and wearing all of these different hats, has now also become the chief marketing officer of their business, and they're having to manage all of these different vendors or all of these different actions that are going on the marketing, plus all the operations, and plus all the accounting and everything else. It's still coming back to them. And so one, by empowering them to just be able to understand what those processes need to be, and maybe what those metrics should be, and again, how to understand those reports that may be coming at them that have all these graphs and click-through rates and all these different things that tend to overwhelm them at times. And if once we get through that and we can kind of show results, like let's pull all of this into one message for a period of time to have one result, then after that, sometimes I'll get kind of elevated and become their fractional chief marketing officer. And so kind of take over the management of that. And I find a lot of the marketing vendors that I tend to work with, they appreciate that too, because I speak their language. And so now I'm kind of the go between and the translator between the two. And they can just hand me the reports, and they can say boom, 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 and save a lot of time, because they're not having to try and educate the business owner on all those things at the same time.
Oh, that is super cool. So who do you serve in your life? I mean, you're working with business owners. What size businesses are you primarily targeting?
So typically my clients will be on the smaller end of the business scale, and I know it's a very relative term. One of my buddies came from an equity background, and he was talking about dealing with small cap companies, and he's like, yeah, they're only at like between 1 and 3 billion. And so I'm like, back the truck up, dude. Like I'm over here, and a lot of times the companies I'm working with are maybe less than 1 million, trying to break through 1 million, or they're trying to break through the 2 or 5 or maybe up to 10. But kind of that sweet spot is maybe 750,000 to 3 million. And so they have success. They've been able to validate what they're doing in the market, but they're just kind of hitting that lid where they're not able to scale it, and it's just becoming more than they can handle on their own.
Good for you. Yeah, that's awesome. That's the same size company that we tend to target, people who want to reach their next million. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's so fun to watch them, isn't it? Like watch them grow, watch them thrive, and just be so happy because they're hitting their numbers. It's exciting. That's really, really cool. So, okay, you went from farming to teaching to sales farmer for this company. Tell me a little bit about that journey. What was it that called you to sales farmer?
So I'll try to condense this into the Reader's Digest version. But So it actually, it was this constant winding path. Because if you had asked me 20 years ago where I'd be today, I was going to be, working in some kind of crops genetic company, and I was going to be a geneticist, and I did my honors thesis in a minor in molecular biology at the University of Florida, and when I went to teach, that was because I had been a state officer in the Future Farmers of America for Florida, which is a big youth leadership organization. And so I was kind of giving back, and I'm going to go teach for a few years, and I'll come back and get my PhD and then go do research. And that's what originally took me to Miami, and that's where I met Pablo. And there was a school opening up, and it was supposed to be a plant biotechnology program, which was right up my alley. And so I could go in and be an FFA advisor and an ag teacher, but also focus on the science and the things that I love there. And so I got into that program, and it was a brand new school. So my first year in the program was only like 20, 25 kids, something like that. And because it was an elective program, I had to market and build relationships, and I had to sell to guidance counselors and to parents. And because we were kind of on the verge of this suburban rural area out on the way west side of Miami-Dade County. And so, families were used to kind of like driving down the roads and seeing these big farming operations. And so some of them just had this idea that like, oh, you're going to teach my kid how to pick beans. And I'm like, no, we're teaching your kids how to splice genes. And we were literally doing some of those types of experiments, making bacteria glow in the dark with jellyfish proteins and all this neat stuff. But I had to market that in some different ways. And so I started taking, like reading marketing books. And a friend of mine, what the real kind of turning point there, he and his wife went to one of these big seminars, kind of like in the Tony Robbins genre of seminars. They're like, oh, you really got to go to this thing. So the next time it came around, my wife and I went to it, and it was like 1,500 people in the Broward County Convention Center. And it was like a 3-day conference, and there was all these different little lessons and constant little sales pitches here and there. But the real thing that caught my attention was that it was one guy, and he had kind of his volunteers and kind of helping with logistics and his little opener and stuff. But for the majority of the time, we're talking about like from 9 a.m. to midnight, it was one guy that was leading this whole audience. And I mean, it was 13-year-olds to octogenarians in the audience, and he had them up and like doing like they passed out magic markers, and they were drawing pictures in their workbooks of their interpretations of cash flow and passive income and
Nice.
all these different business concepts. And they were up doing interpretive dances of it and like all this wild stuff. And the thing that popped out to me was like, he's using Chris strategies, like these things that they would teach us in teacher school, excuse me, to do in these classrooms to engage kids in their own learning. And unfortunately, you get into the school environment. There's a lot of people, they've been doing it their way for a long time, and they're resistant to change. And truthfully, a lot of them just gonna get burned out on that, and so just show up. And I was sitting there just watching, and I'm like, this guy's doing it, like it, and it actually works. And I remember telling my wife, like, oh, I've got to get more of this. And they offered one of the sales pitches was like, oh, if you want to come and learn to teach like us and train like us and do seminars like this, come to this program. And so like, all right, I'm going to go to that program. And when I got there, the one of the original founders of SalesPartners was a guy by the name of Blair Singer. And he was the guy that had taught all of their trainers.
I have
Yeah,
one of his books.
I bet you do. He's one of the Rich Dad advisors with Robert Kiyosaki. Could be like
Yes.
Sales Dogs or something like that.
Sales
And so,
Dogs. I love the book Sales Dogs. Yeah, Blair Singer. That was him, huh?
yeah. So he, one of his lines that I remember distinctly from stage was that leaders have to be teachers, teachers have to be leaders, and the highest form of sales is education. And like when he said that, it was just like, all right, this is my guy. And still didn't have any thought of pursuing that as kind of the career. Like I was literally just kind of taking this like, oh, this is how I can grow my program. Because for like year 1 to year 2, it was like a little bit, and then year 3 was a little bit more. But after I started like bringing these techniques back into the classroom, all of a sudden I could teach a bigger class. And so then there was a value that I could add to the master scheduler and the guidance counselors. Like, all right, I know all your regular science classes are limited to 24, but I can teach more, and like put 40 kids in there. And like I ended up my last year, I would have like, I think my biggest class ever was 52, like high school sophomores and freshmen, like all packed into a class built for 24. And so when I was up for the regional teacher of the year, like the interview committee or whatever, they come in to observe, and then I like walk in and like, where the heck am I supposed to stand? Or they didn't have any seats. They had to literally stand against the back wall because there was no room in the classroom. And it was through that and like using some of Blair's materials and kind of going to some of these things. Eventually we went out, and it was supposed to be just a 2-day, it was 2-day sales and leadership mastery conference out in Arizona, out in Scottsdale. And at the end of that, there was this opportunity because they were starting SalesPartners as a franchise organization, and it had been going for a little while, but it was like, hey, if you're interested in becoming a franchisee, we're going to have an information session about that. And so I just went to that, just like, all right, maybe this is something I'll do one day. And I ended up sitting next to this guy that was a British guy, but he lived in Barcelona, Spain, and he found out that I was from Miami. And one of the activities that we'd had to do was this modeling exercise. And so we had to like take a famous speech or a famous monologue out of a movie. And I ended up getting Ben Affleck's famous monologue from Boiler Room. And like, there's no such thing as a no sales call. And I was like the only one who was able to do that up on stage without just getting ripped to shreds by Blair. And he's like, all right, well, do it bigger. And so I ended up leading the entire audience, and everybody's up. No such thing as a no sales call. Sales made on every call you make. And the guy remembers like, oh, you were the Boiler Room guy. Like, oh, you should totally do this. This would be perfect for you. And I'm like, well, maybe one day I'm going to need the information. Well, it was like this 5-day franchisee induction training. It was open to anybody, but it was like a requirement for franchisees to go through. It's like, no, you should stay for this training for the next 5 days. I'm like, dude, it's like my flight leaves tomorrow morning. I only packed for 2 days. But and he like kept at like every time we would stop and have to discuss something that was being said from the front of the room, he'd just ignore that. And he's like, no, this would be great. Da, 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 da. And so eventually I had to tell him like, dude, I'm on a teacher salary. Like, we've already spent a ton of money, like flying around the country and do all this stuff. I think it was like $5,000. Like, I don't have that liquid right now to just throw at that. He's like, oh, just find a sponsor. I'm like, again, I leave tomorrow morning. And so it came to the end. It was like the very last opportunity to talk. He's like, yeah, I just think it'd be really great. And so I'm like, well, I've been at a sales conference for the last 2 days. So I just looked up at him and I'm like, well, why don't you sponsor me to stay? And he did. And he became my original partner, and it ended up not working out for him over in Spain. And so I ended up like buying him out in the second year. But that was the transition to it. And so then I got all this training, and unfortunately that was just before the Great Recession. And so SalesPartners as a global franchise, we had franchisees all over the world, but it's everybody came in to do more kind of like, it was probably closer to like a Dale Carnegie or a Sandler kind of sales training and having the seminars in groups. But then all of a sudden, like, nobody was doing that. And like, if you weren't one of those companies who had a big long brand, like, and even they had to pivot and go into other things. And so we made this pivot into more like a business coaching model, which I got a lot of great lessons from, but it was ultimately not what everybody came in to do. And so everybody kind of just started doing their own thing, and everybody just kind of went their own ways. And I was one of the last men standing, and actually with one of the other founders that ended up retaining the rights to SalesPartners. I still talk with him on almost a weekly basis, and I just kind of kept the rights to it because I was the only guy in Florida. But it's since then just kind of evolved into my own thing, and that's kind of the story how I went from farm boy to sales and marketing trainer.
Amazing. Amazing. I love how much we have in common. I got my degree in education as well. Although my story is a little different in how I got into sales. You're going to laugh. I was teaching seventh grade. I was teaching
God
social
bless you.
studies. Yeah, the social studies world cultures class, for like geography,
Yeah.
history, sociology, that kind of thing in seventh grade. Found out it was the best form of birth control ever. I didn't want children after that.
Ironic thing, can I tell you? Like my wife and I, we struggled for about 3 years to have a child, and it was not until I was completely severed. Like I had cashed out my retirement, they sent me like the final check, and I was no longer a Miami-Dade County School employee. The next month, she got pregnant, and stuff.
It happens, right? But yeah, I mean, they would ask me, "Oh, do you, Miss Filzen, do you have children?" Yes, 150 of them. But it was funny because I realized that teaching is something that I absolutely love. I am passionate about it, and I teach marketing classes around the country, and I do a lot of events, and I love, love, love teaching. But I prefer having an audience that pays me
Yeah.
and appreciates the wisdom that I bring, as opposed to the kids that are just like, ah, whatever, another adult that I can blow off. But no, I love it how you talked about how the highest form of sales is education. And I've always known that. But to know that the best salespeople are also master teachers, that's a twist on something that I knew, but like it was in the back of my head, and you brought it to the forefront. It's like, well, damn, that's awesome, right? And you're absolutely right. When you're passionate and enthusiastic and you know your stuff and you've been studying it and you can teach it exquisitely and get the auditory, the visual, the kinesthetic,
Yeah.
all of the things, get them up and doing stuff. Yes, I agree. I love, love, love teaching classes that are interactive, because too often people get lectured at, right?
Oh man.
And you also brought up a really interesting point that I did not know, and I've witnessed in COVID times. So I did not know that during the Great Recession, a lot of these educational, Dale Carnegie, various programs kind of were sidelined because of that. And well, let me tell you, I signed up to have Susie Carter as my mentor, and she's extremely successful. She is the coach that was coaching Lisa Nichols, still does, and John Azarath. And so she's got the big guns, right? COVID happens, we're all under her tutelage, and she's like, "I gotta tell you all, these live events, they've dried up. We have to pivot, and everyone needs to pivot. So we're all going to pivot together." And in 2020, man, Rockstar Marketing, holy crap, we pivoted hard, but it was, we came out okay. But
Yeah.
still, like, wow, right? And so I did not realize that, yes, when times are really tough, economy wise, um, the training, people get scared, right?
Yeah.
And you
Well,
see
that's
these,
the people talk about the marketing budget is the first thing to go, but usually it's the external vendors, and so the training right along with that.
yeah,
That tends to be the easiest line item to trim, and oh, it's only temporary, and we all say that, like, oh, that's the worst thing that you could cut, because you need to be having that extra thing. But it's certainly understandable from that. But those that can pivot and that understand the principles of their value, and not just the tactical side and the implementation, because those things just change with time and technology and everything
yes,
else. But if you understand the principles around what you're doing,
yes,
then you can continue to add that value. And I was very surprised, very blessed, and happy. Like June of last year, other than like some big training, like in larger organizations and kind of one-shot deals, but just from meat and potatoes, bread and butter types of services, June of last year was my best month ever. And a lot of times it was because everybody's coming in and, like, their hair's on fire, and like,
right.
what do we do? We need to have a strategic approach to get through this.
Yes, yes. COVID, I think, woke a lot of people up, And yeah, I agree with you. I wrote my book, The Give to Get Principle, as a result of COVID, because everyone was shifting so hard, and I was sharing what their secret sauce was or is. So I shared a lot of the success stories, and I needed to live it myself. But you're right, like COVID, no doubt about it, a horrible, horrible event, just as the Great Recession, just as the Great Depression, and future events that are coming along. But if you can find the good in every situation and
Right.
learn from those things, and just as you said, focus on the principles. How do you pivot and dodge? How do you maneuver to still provide a lifeline to the people that are counting on you? So that leads me to the next question that I have for you. We all have a why. you
Hmm.
know um, I had this beautiful conversation with a musician the other night. My husband and I love to dance West Coast swing, and so on Saturday nights we tend to go to the same place because this musician, he's just so wonderful, and we've just become really good friends with him. And he was sharing that for him, he chooses not to take breaks when he's doing his performance. He's 3 hours straight, no breaks at all. And he says that he feels stoned because he's taking his music and his talent, and he knows that he's bringing a certain level of joy and love to the room, and that he knows that if he took a break, that high beautiful energy and all that good stuff that's going on, it will disintegrate,
Yes.
and so he has to rebuild that up. And so he's like, no, I know that we're all in this community together, and somehow that joy and that love is translating into something bigger than us, and directly, so I thought, wow, that's a great why. Most musicians, or most people, when we go into our job, we're like, I'm going to my job to go make some money, right?
Yeah.
And then the next level is, well, I'm going to do my job to do better things for the world. But then if you can really tap into it, it's like, well, I am answering my divine um,
Yeah.
purpose through what I do. So I'm just so curious, what is your why?
Well, I'm super tempted to get up and like draw another flip chart right now, but I'll just give
Go for
the
it.
auditory
You're
version.
welcome to do it.
So uh, my hands are still greasy after dinner. It'll take a little while to get those marker lids off. But
Okay.
if you think about a bee, right? Because so Buckminster Fuller, he was this great philosopher, and he had this analogy talking about the things that people should do, and what is the job that needs to be done, and the only thing that, or the thing that you should do is the thing that you see that needs to be done that no one else is doing. And that's a rough paraphrase, and I'm probably butchering that. But he gave this analogy of a bee, and he said, you have a bee, and a bee goes out to flowers. And I share the story often, like, why do bees go out to flowers? And a lot of times from the audience, what do you think I hear? What do you say? Why do bees go to flowers?
Probably to go get pollen to, bring back to the colony, and feed the queen and make some honey and take care of everybody.
All right, so ultimately the bees are going to grab the nectar and the pollen, and to come back and to make honey. But a lot of times people are just like, oh, bees pollinate the flowers. Well, that's true, and that's actually the greatest value ecologically that the bees provide. But the bees don't go to the flowers to pollinate the flowers. They're going to make honey. And so Fuller said that we are very much like the bees, but instead of going out every day and leaving our homes to make honey, we're going out to make money. We're money bees. And
I love that. We're money bees.
the the real thing comes in, and Fuller was like constantly talking about like precession and this idea of bodies acting on bodies. And he would talk about ripple effects, and you drop the pebble in the pond and the ripple effects go out. And so the ripple effects of making money are that value is added to the marketplace, because the only way that you ultimately make money is to add value. And I kind of look at that and say, all right, we can look at a lot of things out here, like realistically, those ripple effects go in all directions. And so while there is value that is also being created, a lot of times, unfortunately, people go out and make a bunch of mess out there in justified by, oh, I need to go out and make money, and so I'm going to go screw somebody over or whatever, I'm going to go get mine. And that it happens. And we've all probably been in those situations where we felt that. But Fuller's point was that, all right, the value is created at 90 degrees, these ripple effects to people pursuing money. And he said, we're bigger than the bees, though. We're better than the bees. We're conscious. We can be aware of these ripple effects. And what if we instead just focused on the value and trusted that the 90-degree ripple effects that come out of pursuing value can also bring in the money? And
Yes.
and that truly was the flip chart. When I saw that kind of drawn out and explained to it, that even more so than the the education stuff, I mean, that resonated with me. I say that flip chart kind of changed the trajectory of my life, and because I'd never really looked at it that way. And so bringing it back to me, so what is that value that I'm focused on, right? What is my why? And I used to be a training director for BNI, and I saw Simon Sinek's great golden circle and start with why,
Love
and
him.
it was
Love
really
him.
great piece. And I try to train folks going networking. It's like, oh, you need to talk with about your why when you give your presentation. And people would stand up and say, oh, I do this because I really love to travel, and I want to spend time with my grandkids. I'm like, I get that's like your internal motivation, but that's not the why. Like, the why is bigger than you. The why is like this other thing. Like, no, everybody's like glad you can go and travel and do these other things, but they're not doing business with you so you can go and travel, right?
Right.
What is the bigger why that's
Right.
out there? What is that big problem in the marketplace that you might not be solving the whole thing, but you're a small part of the solution to it? And so for me, what I look at in dealing with folks in chambers and BNI and just kind of these small businesses in this space, especially down in Miami where I got started, they talk about it being this entrepreneurial town, but it's not like Silicon Valley, and maybe it's becoming a little more like that. But it's more like, all right, this isn't a bunch of people that were going out trying to create the next Facebook or the next Uber or something like that. It's largely a bunch of people that got tired of working for somebody else and said, I can do it better than this moron. And they went out and became a self-employed town. There's a ton of self-employed people who have these small businesses. And all of a sudden they get in there, and just because they're a good lawyer or a good contractor or a good mechanic, whatever it
I
is,
mean, they're a good
they
business person. Yeah.
realize that there's a lot more to it than that. But
Yep.
having that freedom to be able to step away and say that I'm not dependent on an employer, I'm not handcuffed to this position. I can go and I can add value to the marketplace in the way that I see it. I can do things the right way as I see it, and treat people the right way. I want to be free to serve the market in the way that I best see it done. I believe that that's ultimately kind of where we're headed, and people are going to become less and less dependent on employers or the government to provide for their needs. And and we've seen this so much during COVID that people had to go out and figure out something way to do, and the only way to do that, to make that money, is to provide that value. And my why is ultimately being able to empower everyone to go out and be self-sufficient, provide for themselves, their family, their community, maybe grow a big business, but at the very least, they can go out and be free to serve the people in their marketplace and be richly rewarded for that. And ultimately that level of freedom helps make the world a better place. And so that's my why.
Mic drop. That's awesome. That is so, so cool, Will. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I'm so loving talking to you. Okay, so advice. I always like to ask our guests, what advice do you have for our listeners? Because boy, you bring a lot of power. Um, there's so much you can go. You can go in any direction with this. What advice do you have for people?
Well, so if I was to boil it down into one thing, it comes back to that planning stage that I kind of talked about in the client cultivation cycle, what I call it. What are you selling and who are you selling it to? And that's been said in a lot of different ways. One of my mentors was always basically kind of pounding that into me. Know your product, know your customer. And if you start to break down the services that you provide and you actually look at the markets that you truly serve the best, then you can start to develop your messaging, the marketing. You can start giving direction to that, to say, I need these people, this profile, this avatar, however you want to describe it, but I need this group of people to be familiar with us, to trust us, to understand our credibility, to understand the differentiation of why we're better in certain circumstances than the direct competition, indirect competition, just the status quo. And if you start developing your messaging around that and directing the messaging in that way, then you can make that offer of value that is particularly resonant with that group of people. And you're not out just throwing spaghetti against the wall and let's do this and let's try that and let's put a sign over here and let's do digital ads over there, and just, you know, really trying to it's more like fishing, right? Like, I'm just going to go out here and kind of let's chum the waters and see if we can attract up anything and see what we can catch. There is that intentionality to it, to say, we're going to serve this market, we're going to serve it with this product or service. We understand the value as they perceive it, and we are going to be intentional about communicating to that, to convert those folks into our clients or customers, and then delivering on that value. And when you start to break the offerings that you have up in your business into those kinds of campaigns, the marketing and the messaging starts to kind of really write itself, and from that deeper understanding. And there's always testing, and there's always different things that you have to do, and you have to pivot to, you know, what the market is demanding and what the channels are, because, you know, Lord knows there's 10,000 different ways that you can try and promote your business. But when you have that clarity about who you're really trying to serve, and in what situations, under what circumstances you are the best option for them to solve that particular problem that they have, then you can really start to focus, and you can start to scale those opportunities, because you're not wasting your marketing budget, you're not wasting your effort and your resources trying to communicate with all these people that you can't ultimately even really serve. So get focused.
Get focused. That is so true. Michael Michalowicz wrote the book, The Pumpkin Plan, and that was a life changer for me. I love that book so much. I think I've read it 4 times. And it's true. It's like, if you want to grow your big pumpkin, you got to get rid of all the other pumpkins that are taking energy away from it. Focus, focus, focus. The 80-20 rule, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. 80% of your revenue is going to come from 20% of your contacts.
But
So,
here's a caveat with the 80-20 rule. And, you know, we talk about, like, all right, find the 20%, find the 20%. But don't forget that you're going to have to go through 100 to find the 20.
oh, for sure.
Right. And so,
Sure.
you know, you've got to get up to that 100%. Then you find that 20, and now we turn that 20 into that 100%, and then that process repeats, and that's a cycle. But you're always going to have that 80%, and, you know, that bottom 20%, and that's just part of the natural growth cycle of the business. You know, just because you prune off all those little pumpkins, that vine still keeps trying to put on other ones. And so it is that constant process of just understanding what is you know, what is happening, because that pumpkin vine doesn't just want to grow one pumpkin. It wants to have many pumpkins and many opportunities to propagate itself.
Love it. Oh, summed up so perfectly by the farmer himself. Ah, I love it, love it, love it. There's so much in common. Florida, farming, teaching, sales and marketing. My
Somewhere on the
goodness.
shelf, I have a trophy that my wife and I won for East Coast swing dancing. So
East Coast swing, fantastic.
I think that's what it was.
Awesome.
It was a while back. She was into it, and I realistically, I think the only reason was because we did one of those lifts, and I could do that at the end. And she had on some, like, bright, like, hot pink and tangerine panties, and they kind of flashed the judges, and they made a comment. I think that might have been the key to it, but still, there's some experience there.
Oh my gosh, that is hilarious. True definition of flash and trash. That's funny. That is so funny. Okay, Will Dukes, sorry, Will Dukes. How do people get a hold of you? Because my goodness, everyone's going to want to talk to you after this. What is your email? What is your website? How do we get a hold of you? What's your phone number? All that fun stuff. I'm going to write it all down.
All right. So the website is salespartnersflorida.com. And anybody that wants to just hop on a call, talk about what's going on in their sales and marketing, if they throw the /schedule on the back there, there's an option for a free Q&A call, and happy to talk about what's going on in their business. The Probably the more direct way to get in touch with me is to find me on LinkedIn. And so if you just search for Will Dukes, I'll probably come up. It'll say Sales Farmer. That'll be a little green tractor in the name, easy to identify there. And that's a great way to connect and just kind of see some of the other stuff. We're on all the social. They can look for one Will Dukes or Sales Partners Florida and be able to find us through those things. And if they want to email me directly, it's WILLD at spfla.com for salespartnersflorida.com.
spfla.com. Fantastic. Oh my goodness, Will, you're amazing. So much fun.
Thank
Too
you so
bad we
much.
didn't go to the same college. I went to Florida State, but that's okay.
Not everybody's perfect.
I know, right? All the boys went to University of Florida and all the girls went to Florida State. Well, that's generalization, but you know, the history of it. The guys' school, the girls' school. Yeah, exactly.
I did a summer program in high school for like 6 weeks at FSU, and they would walk us by, the old gate where, it used to be all walled in, and there was like one gate into the university. But yeah.
Yep. And my grandpa went to University of Florida and grandma went to Florida State. So of course the rivalry within the old household. So yeah, just the way it is, But that's awesome. Truly, it is such a pleasure getting to know you. Everybody, I hope you had a great time watching me and Will duke it out. Pardon me. But we had so much fun. I know you haven't heard that ever before, but it just came to me.
Once or
Sorry,
twice, maybe.
I think I'm original, and obviously I'm not, but that's okay. But no, it was so much fun. You're based in Orlando now, right?
Right. We still have our office in Coral Gables, which is right outside of Miami. But
Excellent.
I kind of split time between there, but I am in Orlando now.
Awesome. Well, I'll be heading to Jacksonville in December, so who knows? Maybe we'll have Pablo throw a party where we can all get together and hang out.
Hey, there you go. Never know.
Right on. All right, everybody, thank you so very much for joining us tonight. We had a great time. All right, see you guys next time. Bye. Bye, Will.